Hey, good afternoon, church family. It's Wednesday, time when we'd normally be thinking about getting together and having a meal for our manna meal and then our Bible classes. And just COVID-19, it obviously has stopped that. Just wanted to share some thoughts with you this afternoon about trials and patience and perseverance. One of my favorite stories in the Old Testament is found in Daniel chapter 3. With Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace when they were commanded to bow down to Nebuchadnezzar or face the consequences of that. And although we're not under that kind of persecution, I think we are under the grip of fear and uncertainty and doubt, and maybe some panic. And just think about the words of the three Hebrew servants, and as they interact with Nebuchadnezzar and go into the fiery furnace. I just want to read from Daniel chapter 3, beginning in verse 16. So this is after Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego have said they wouldn't bow down to worship Nebuchadnezzar, and Nebuchadnezzar offered one more threat, and then here's their response. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to present a defense to you in this matter. If our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the furnace of the blazing fire and out of your hands, O king, let him deliver us. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods, and we will not worship the golden statue that you have set up." I think what these three servants of God just remind us about his faith and trust in God. And I love that little three-word phrase, "but if not." And as we look at them and they recognize and they fully confess that their trust is in God, they pray for deliverance. And they didn't want to go into the furnace, and they prayed that God would take them out of that. But their idea, but if not, then God will make that bad situation good. And I really appreciate their approach to Nebuchadnezzar and to that moment of crisis, their understanding that really they didn't feel the need to answer to Nebuchadnezzar about the things that were going on in their society or make some kind of defense for their action. They just lived out their faith in front of Nebuchadnezzar and others. They also recognize, are fully aware of the situation that's going on. They're not naive. They're not sticking their head in the sand. They recognize the presence of evil, and they recognize the prevailing crisis that's right before them. So they're not ignoring it. They're addressing it. But they also then really stake their claim with who they stand with and where their trust is, and that is with God, because they said that it is God ultimately whom they serve. Even though they're serving Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon, ultimately they do so under the submission to God. And then I love their conviction that God can deliver, and if God chooses not to deliver, then God is still faithful, and God will make something good out of that situation. And ultimately, it is their submission to God and trust that I think gives us a hope and gives us assurance and just shows us that we can handle diversity and we can handle crisis and we can handle adversity that comes into our life. I know that this is not how we want to live, and that our comforts and our mobility and the things that we want to do are taken away from us. In some regard, and some of that's voluntary, obviously, in our showing love to neighbor from practicing social distance and staying away. But listen, God is still God, and the fourth person who shows up in that fiery furnace with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and ultimately delivers them from death and from that situation, is God, and that the Spirit of God is among us and dwells in us and is active. And God will guide us through that. I pray for perseverance for God's people. I pray for patience. I pray that we will find ways to take advantage of opportunities, to be salt and light to our neighbors, take advantage of opportunities to love our neighbor, even as we practice what the CDC has put in place for us in social distancing. And I pray ultimately that we as a faith community will realize that it is not physical space always that binds us together. It is the holy space that we live in under the auspices and the authority and the love of Jesus, and that brings us together. And so we're not in a fiery furnace. We're at a difficult time. There are people that we know that have been affected physically. There's certainly people that we pray for their families as they've experienced death through this disease. We pray for our government and our both national and state and local governments as they try to be as effective as possible in slowing this virus down. But we also pray for our people who are isolated and who are lonely and who need that fourth partner in the furnace. So be that fourth partner for others. Contact them through text and through email and by phone, or maybe even do something really strange. Write a note and put it in the mail and let people know how much that you appreciate them and you miss them, and that you are there to support others and support one another. Because ultimately Jesus is here supporting us. As Jesus stood in the furnace with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, Jesus stands with us now in our own form of quarantine. And I pray that we'll persevere and that we won't give up hope. We are still planning to go live on Facebook on Sunday morning at 9:30, and then we'll upload that to YouTube, and I'll send those links out to you. Know that we miss you, and we miss being together with you, and we love you, and we look forward to just being together again soon, and pray that things will happen and that our nation will be submissive and be smart to CDC's recommendations, and that ultimately this virus will slow down. And I don't want us to go back to normal. I want us to go back to being God's people and with a new sense of identity of who we are and what God's called us to be. But I do look forward to our assemblies again soon. In the meantime, we'll continue to communicate this way, and we'll continue to pray for one another and continue to keep you updated on things that are going on through our church. So check your emails and check your text. As I've said before, as God's people, I think we can still rejoice always and pray without ceasing, and in everything we can give thanks. Bless you.